Thank you for joining us today at the Summit. We really appreciate you taking time to share your expertise with all of our viewers. For anyone that's not familiar with you and your work, would you like to take a minute just to introduce yourself and tell everyone what you're specializing in and what you've been doing?
Sure. My name is Pamela Slim, and I am in Mesa, Arizona. I have a small business incubator right on Main Street in Mesa, which is a lot of fun. We opened up in September. And I'm an author, a speaker, and a business coach. And my main area of interest is really helping to build the capacity of small business owners and those who serve the small business market. So people like myself who are business coaches, organizations that serve the small business market, and brands who have small business owners as customers.
Perfect. I know one of the areas you focus on is community and building a community around you. And one question that I find that comes up, and something I ran into when I started my first business, small business owners, especially if it's their first business and the people in their close network and family aren't investors or aren't business owners, they don't sometimes get the support they need. Sometimes, there's too much worry about the risk and the time involvement. So if you're a small business owner in that kind of a situation, how do you go about finding that community of maybe other business owners or like-minded people that when you're having that bad day, you can go to and say, hey, I'm having this problem, and not worry about your family freaking out that already doesn't approve, or be able to bounce ideas off of?
Very much so, yeah. No, I know. In Escape from Cubicle Nation, that was my first book, I did a whole chapter around family and friends and how you break the conversation at looking at specific dynamics, because what our family and friends want to do is they want to support us and they want to keep us safe. And very often, not everybody, but for some people, when you're setting off to leave your safe corporate job to do something insane like start a business and take on all kinds of risk, they feel like they're doing you a service to say, what are you doing? Don't do it. It's really scary. So I think the first principle to think about in community building, and this is it is across the spectrum. So this is when you are trying to find ideal customers, which is a very important part of setting out on your own. When you're trying to find, I call peer mentors, people who might be collaborative, who are on the same journey as you are. If you're trying to find investors, if you're trying to find partners, the principle is the same, and that is that the first piece is really identifying who it is that you're excited about serving in your business. So really, who's the ideal customer? As we know, you can have a few different profiles. You could have different customer segments, types of customers, different problems that you solve. But you want to look at, when you define that, what is that natural ecosystem around your ideal customer? So where are they going to get information, resources, support for the problem that you're helping them to solve? And, when you have a professional services business, it's easier sometimes to think about a problem to be solved. Like you're in a financial conundrum and you need a financial planner, or you don't know what you want to do with your life and you need a career coach, right? Your business is not doing well and you need somebody to help with marketing. But even if you have a product that you're selling, a physical product, it is meeting a particular need or a challenge. Maybe you have a beautiful candle that people need in order to have a wonderful scent in their home or something. So as you start to look at what is that ecosystem that surrounds that person, who are they paying attention to? Who are experts they're listening to? What kind of events or conferences are they attending? What products do they use? What technology do they use? What are maybe government or nonprofit organizations they might go to for support? Things that we're familiar with, like the Small Business Development Corporation or Small Business Association or SCORE, or a lot of local, here in Mesa, since I've been here in September, I've met so many people, from the arts center that we have, who are doing work in support of small business owners. So as you begin to identify, there's this natural ecosystem that already surrounds your ideal customer. And my main premise is for you to get the support you need, ultimately to deliver the service and solve the problem of people who you care to solve. Why not put your energy into building that community? Right? You can get peers and colleagues that share a similar passion for helping those people solve their problem. And it's a very big world. Everybody has a specific role to play. So even though somebody could look like a direct competitor, as you dig into it, usually you provide kind of a unique lens into it. So within the ecosystem, then you start to identify what I call watering holes, which are places in person or online that have large numbers of ideal customers, peers, partners, prospects. So that could look like, where are you guys located? What city are you in?
Are you in?
We're
We're
in
in
Charleston,
Charleston.
West Virginia.
Charleston, West Virginia. How lovely. So I imagine in Charleston that there might be places where business owners congregate, everything from the Chamber of Commerce to you'd go to meetup.com and you might look for, entrepreneur groups. You might participate in online communities, which is one of the ways I know a lot of people found me in the early years. Everything was online for my virtual coaching business. And through time and kind of practice and participating in these communities, you start to notice the ones that are really high leverage for you. And it really is that one to many, because when you start, it's like you calling out for help, like, where are you, friends? Where are you, customers? It's very lonely, and people can come one at a time, which could not be the pace that we want. Whereas when you look at it from, what's the natural ecosystem already around people? Where are they already going? And where are these watering holes? It's one to many, much quicker way to reach all the people who you want to reach.
Great. So let me ask you a question because it sounds like essentially building a customer avatar or figuring out where they're hanging out, who they're connecting with, who they're reading. And it sounds like a lot of people you're talking about connecting with would also be potential strategic partners or strategic partnerships. How do we differentiate between someone that we can call up and say, hey, I'm having this problem with a client or a vendor and I'm really stressed out, and a strategic partner? Or are they the same people, and is there a way to draw that line between a business partner and, say, a confidant, essentially, if we need both in certain situations?
I think certain people can fulfill different roles, but they require different foundation of values and sometimes a different skill set, and then a different business aptitude and a strategic business focus. So when you look at, to me, somebody who would be an ideal type of call it a peer mentor, right? Somebody who's a confidant or you can go to cry safely to when inevitable challenges happen. We've all been there. Somebody, from my estimation, needs to be compassionate. They need to be honest and direct so that they can provide positive feedback. It's really helpful if they can provide feedback in a way that's actually helpful, which is not saying, oh my God, you're an idiot. Why did you do that? Who does that? That's usually not very helpful. But can instead say, I noticed that the last 5 times that you went out to a sales call, on the way when you were talking to me on the phone, you kept saying, oh my God, I'm going to blow it. I'm going to blow it. I'm going to blow it. Might your thoughts be something that's contributing to your lack of effective closure of sales deals or something, right? So somebody who has a good perspective, who's going to give it to you straight, but who has empathy and compassion. And to me, it's also somebody who is willing to do the work themselves. So you're helping them. There's reciprocity where when you're crying on their shoulder, they're crying on your shoulder. And and they also have a value set that says, as I say frequently, we all need each other. We're here to be supporting each other, and not so much somebody who might say, and there's nothing wrong with it because we're all wired differently, but somebody who might who might say, it's a shark tank out there. I'm all in it for me. It's really competitive. I have to be really careful, who I share information with. That's probably not going to be the best kind of person because their values, they may hesitate to share different things because of their worldview. So those are characteristics to me of somebody who could be an excellent confidant. That person could also inhabit the strategic business partner space, which means they have, if you look at, again, imagine this visual of the core challenge or problem that the person who you want to serve, faces. In order for them to solve it, they need a whole bunch of stuff, right? Like, as wonderful as we think we are, whether it be business strategery or a great logo or funding or whatever, like they need a whole bunch of stuff in order to solve their problem. So a strategic partner is essentially somebody who has another puzzle piece, right? I had somebody I worked with for years when I was doing all the Escape from Cubicle Nation coaching, early stage entrepreneur journey coaching, people leaving corporate jobs to start a business. What does everybody need? They need a basic website, something basic in WordPress that looks decent, that doesn't cost a fortune, right? To begin to hang a shingle for their side hustle. So I had somebody who was in my community who was a great WordPress designer, reasonably priced, did the work, Great. I probably sent her 50 different leads. In that case, I just do it because I was super happy to do it. There wasn't like a financial remuneration, but there could easily be, right? There's somebody who has a piece of the puzzle that is critical for the person who you're providing it to. And by working together, you have higher leverage. That's where you really have that strategic advantage. Or I've had a lot of cases, I have a lot of colleagues, peers of mine, Charlie Gilkey and Jonathan Fields, and a whole number of people where we essentially sometimes like have directly competitive programs, right? We're both marketing thing retreats or online programs or whatever that are directly competitive. The way we see it is we understand because we know each other so well and we're good friends because we all have that other part, right? These are people who have both strategic and the compassion that we know where each other's strengths are. So I can be listening to a client and I'm like, you know what? You kind of need some of Jonathan's like magic around copywriting and marketing because that's really his jam. If you're looking more for strategic purpose and community building, I know that's me. If you're looking at, systems and, really understanding the operations of your business, you're probably better off with Charlie. And so that way, even though you might have people who are competitors, then you understand how each one of you really has a unique differentiation. So there can be people who have both, right? Strategic fit and compassion, but they're not the same. And you need to sort for and treat each one in a very distinct way. Just because we may be friends and really like each other and our kids play soccer together or whatever, right? We all like to go salsa dancing or, of which I do love to go salsa dancing, and my kid does play soccer. It does not mean that we would have a fantastic business relationship. We have to have very specific conversations about what you bring, what I bring, what our market needs, our values, our business practices in order to make it a beautiful thing.
I think that's perfect. And actually, that brings me to a question that I've always had. You read your Rich Dad Poor Dads and you're built to sell, and the concept of a mentor that's way beyond you is always brought up, but how to find one and how to structure that agreement is almost never brought up. So say that's what we're looking for, more that person that's already done the path, that's already had the success, that's way beyond us. Is there a technique for finding that and structuring that relationship so that it works for everybody?
I see it as, let's see. So there's a philosophy about it, and not so much a technique because it's a very organic thing. No matter what, so one of the philosophical components is that you have to see it as being you're equal. You're just a less experienced equal. Not everybody feels that way. Not every expert feels that way. So when you're finding your right person who's a mentor, fundamentally, I think you both need to see it that way, right? Somebody will see potential in you, will consider it worthwhile in order to spend time and energy, in working with you. And you have great respect for that person and what they have achieved, and yet you're not just worshiping them or looking for them to take a magic wand and make you famous or make you successful. I was at a panel years ago at South by Southwest that was blog to book. So it was people like myself who had written blogs that turned into books. And I had Guy Kawasaki, who was on the panel as well, who I affectionately call my link sugar daddy, because he kind of broke my story on the internet, if you will, when I on a whim one night shared a blog post with him called An Open Letter to CEOs that I had a tiny audience, and he liked it and he shared it on his blog the next day, and it just the skies opened, right? It was amazing, and I'll appreciate him to this day. He ended up writing the foreword to my book. He's just a totally wonderful person. He said somebody was asking him a very similar question. And he said, people often say that, he said, speaking for himself, that I have the golden touch, the Midas touch, right? Like what I touch turns to gold. He said, actually, I only touch gold. So his point is somebody is going to want to mentor you, and I make this point in Body of Work in my own book, based on what you have already created, not because all of a sudden they're just going to make time in order to teach you everything that they know. And specifically, when you look at somebody that you're choosing who because you've really studied their work and they've done amazing things and they're teaching certain principles, and that you're living those principles, you're doing that work, you're shipping, you're right doing all that stuff, you are connecting with your own community, and you're not coming at it from the position of, being needy and wanting to be made, to be ordained. It's a very touchy thing. And to me, that approach, that emotional approach, it's almost like a spiritual approach. Like, no matter whatever your spiritual foundation is, right? It's coming at it from this perspective of what really is your understanding about what this relationship is. And it has to have reciprocity in it. So you always have to be answering, what would the benefit be for somebody who does not have much time at all to be spending time with me? And to me, the best equation is because they get super excited by what it is that you're building that's highly in alignment with what they're doing and what they're building. So I think that's one piece. The other one is where it is very rarely, I see it more as a very organic process where you just want to be asking for tiny little bits of time. So you might spend, it's like, it's really creepy when you think about it because it sounds very much like stalking, but let's call it strategic marketing analysis, where you might always end up going to events where some of your heroes are speaking or attending, and you pay attention to what they write, and you show up and you're tweeting to them, and you're writing a comment on a blog, and you know people in common, and pretty soon they're like, man, who is that person? Like, that's kind of interesting. You're everywhere, which can be super creepy, so let's just acknowledge that. Always wanting to do it with respect, in right, not in like, I'm not worthy and I'm just showing up to be a fan, and to not have any of my own pride over what I'm doing, because you're all equal, but that you begin to show a presence, and where you are places where they are. And then you're also paying attention to what is important to them. Do they have a book coming out that you could help spread the word? Like, do they have charity things they're working on that you could be useful for? And so those are ways I think that you can start to slowly build the relationship and just ask for tiny little bits of time. If somebody has 5 minutes that they have to share, respect that time, thank them, follow up, with a thank you card, and then just let it go and let it be organic, and keep looking at it again as, if you're most likely the kind of mentor that you want to choose is somebody who is in your ecosystem, right? You're playing a role in serving the same kind of client. So you're happy that they're there. They get to know you more, and they're happy that you're there. And you begin to just really do your work. And then it becomes much more natural. I've seen approaches and things that, like you said, that might be like, do we do a contract? Do we look at how many hours? It just, I don't think it's that way for mentoring. In that way, depending on who the person is, like, sometimes that's why you pay them in order to get their expertise. And that's a good way to do it. And then sometimes those relationships can end up turning into more of a natural, ongoing connection. Think about if anybody's come from corporate, right? Anybody who's kind of been a mentor for you over your career, it's generally because you've been through the trenches together, you've done great work, you have their back. And then that's where part of that kind of connection and loyalty starts to develop. Well said. Said in like 3 seconds as opposed to the 12 minutes that I took to give my explanation. I'm going to drink some water after that long explanation. Yeah, I think first pay attention to who already is naturally doing it. So you might want to put certain business processes in place where anytime somebody new comes in the door, you have a general question you ask of, how did you hear about me? Was there a specific person who mentioned me or something. So you can start to track and notice when people are referring others. And very often, you've probably gotten the emails where somebody's like, oh, so and so referred me to you, and therefore I'm going to talk to you. So you can track that and make sure that's in your business operations. And so then you can pay attention to it and maybe then have a little bit of data collection where you start to notice the people who are doing that. You can have other things like Google alerts and beginning to pay attention to who might be talking about you and sharing the message or retweeting what it is that you're sharing on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or whatever. It's usually not that hard. It's usually pretty obvious when you just begin to pay attention to what's happening on social channels with who are people who naturally are spreading the word about what it is that you're doing. Not surprising, the people who tend to be the biggest fans and advocates are those also who you have really joyfully worked with and who you love to work with, where you might notice as you're working with them that their orientation is more toward being a connector. Have you guys read Tipping Point, or any of your viewers/listeners, that classic Malcolm Gladwell chapter in Tipping Point about mavens, salesmen, and connectors, where people might be actually great fans of your work. They may love the depth as mavens of what it is that you do, but they're not necessarily going to share it. People who are salespeople can be excited about it, and when prompted, could make a really great pitch that gets people excited, right? But connectors, by their nature, are people who have a big network, who love to connect people with each other, who are naturally going to do it, whether you ask them or not. And so to me, that's part of how it is that you can start to put certain identification practices in place. If you have a professional service organization, you work with people, you really get to know them, and you can notice, they might always be talking about others. They might be the type of people who are always introducing you to other people. Those are some of the classic symptoms of having somebody who's a connector. So usually there's enough that's happening where you can just begin to track and pay attention to who already are your biggest fans and advocates, and putting in place things to be, thanking them for that, encouraging, reciprocating. One thing I find, and because I'm a massive connector, that's the way I was wired. I was so excited to learn that it's actually a thing once I read Tipping Point. And actually, there's another great book. A former client, Erica Dewan, wrote a book called Get Big Things Done, The Power of Connectional Intelligence. And so it takes connector and it expands it on this really cool level of looking at different types of connectors. She argues, which I think is a great argument, that we have IQ, we have EQ, emotional intelligence, and now we need connectional intelligence in today's world. So understanding different types of connectors, which can be super helpful. But doing things like mentioning other people that you work with. See how meta that was? Because I just did that. Notice that? Okay. It wasn't really to illustrate a point, but I can't help but do it, because that's the way that when you're constantly promoting other people's work, when you get excited about what people are doing and you're sharing it, it creates that feeling of reciprocity. It makes people want to share, versus if you have more of an empire and all of your communication for your company is all about, and then we did this, and then we're so cool, and we won this award, and we're so awesome. It doesn't engender so much of a feeling of reciprocity. That's a judgment. That's my values. That's clearly, it works for some people, truly. It really does. Know who you are. But if you really do like to have more of that shared success value, where you want to have more of these partners as opposed to competitors, because not everybody does, and that's okay, right? There's a lot of super successful people out there that are just much more competitive, and that's the way they see the world, and that's okay. When you start to talk about building a community, the one thing I'll say that's very common is people interchange having a bunch of fans on Facebook or having a big email list with a community. Different things. A community is actually a group of people that are really, connected by shared values and shared purpose, with reciprocity and mutual benefit and mutual respect. Not just a volume of people who think you're really cool.
Or willing to put up with you, at least.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more question. I think that leads into it really well. In most communities, there's almost unlimited opportunities to connect with people in real time.
Yeah.
But obviously, there's a limited amount of time. how do we decide where to put our energy between networking events, coaching, little league, connecting with parents? Again, there's so many things. If we're a busy business owner and we have a limited amount of time, how do we decide where to focus, where to put that time and energy to make the most out of these connections in our community?
So the first is, if you do have like a specific business purpose where part of what you're trying to do is to, build a community around serving your core customer, which really helps your business, then you want to have a clear sense for your ideal customers, and there might be a number of different profiles. How do they communicate? What do they do? Are they just people who are totally, working from home in their, in their home office that never go out? Are they people who are constantly at conferences? Are they on LinkedIn? So you want to look at what are the communication and marketing vehicles that those people are using already. And then within that, when you're doing some of the testing and trying, right, you can go into an experiment where you might go to a certain conference or you go to a meetup group. I love running experiments and challenges. It's my favorite thing. So it makes it a little bit more fun, right? As opposed to just thinking like, oh yeah, I went to 10 events and like they were all awful, I'm not finding out anything. If you go in setting a hypothesis of this month, I have a hypothesis based on my research that this group I found in Meetup and this conference and this coffee shop in my local, Main Street is a place that I'm going to meet ideal people. And this is why I have the hypothesis, and I'm going to go out and test it and really see, do I feel like they're my people? Is it a, interesting group? Does it look like it's good or not? And you can have those experiences and just track a little bit of notes of like, was it as I thought? And if not, why not? So you're looking at it from a lens with a little bit more discipline. And then from there, you can start to notice where might be the best places to spend your time. So there's a period of just experimentation because you never know. Something can sound great. It's kind of like, it's been a long time since I've dated. Thank God. I love my husband. I've been married a long time. But right, remembering those days, it's like the difference between an online dating profile and meeting somebody in real life. Sometimes radically different. Hopefully not too radical for those of you who are still dating. So you need to actually go in those environments and meet the people to really know if that's a good place for you to spend time or not. So take a little bit of time dating, and then you start to get your serious commitments. And I like to zoom in where you're like, okay, I know that I'm going to 2 conferences a year, and these are the ones because these are the places where I find all of my ideal folks. One of my dear friends here, Susan Beyer, who does a lot of audience research, she goes to like 4 conferences a year for digital marketing agencies that's her target client base. And she gets all the work she needs all year by going to those 4 conferences. That's everybody who needs her services is all there in one place. But that's after doing a lot of experimentation and testing and trying.
I probably met her because I go to about 6 of those a year, and we are a digital marketing agency, so that's funny.
Right?
Yeah. So it's smart business.
Exactly.
Well, I think we're pretty much out of time, but thank you for everything. This was great information.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I mean, even for me in particular, you answered one of my long-standing questions, so that was great. Like, I got a lot of value from me. So.
Well, I'm so happy.
I appreciate that. So thank you very much. For anyone that's watching that wants to follow up with you, learn more about your programs, or how they can stay involved with you, what's the best way for them to reach out? Or
So you can go to pamelaslim.com, my main site, and that's where all my social connections are. We have a contact page, so anybody who wants to send an email, I'm totally happy to receive it and get back to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for all the great content and all the great information.
Sounds awesome. I'm actually writing a book on this topic, so you got me in a good time. So look for it sometime in the distant future.
Okay. Well, everyone can follow you, and then they can keep up with it that way, so it'll be perfect. They'll know when it comes out.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. It was nice talking to you.